let's take a moment to think about this slavery. When we hear the word slavery, the first thing that comes to our mind when we hear the word slavery is something like this. This image represents the most well-known and clear example of what slavery actually is. Slavery has formed part of our history and our society since the birth of the first civilizations. And it was crucial for the rise of the most powerful empires that once ruled the world. The abolition of the slavery represents a huge achievement in human history. It set the beginning of a new era, an era of equality and fairness for all, or at least that is what we think. However, slavery continues to be part of our society even today. My name is Eduardo Díaz. Let's talk about the modern slavery. But what is the modern slavery? Modern slavery is a term that refers to all types of exploitation in which an individual finds itself and cannot reject or abandon due to threats, violence, or power abuse. It's basically the same as the slavery definition. A slave is a person who lacks freedom. Slavery is an excessive subjugation where a person forces another obligations or work that cannot abandon because that person is subjugated by threats, violence, or power abuse. As such, we could say that slavery hasn't disappeared. It has just camouflaged itself. It has just mutated like a virus and spread across every continent, infecting every sovereign nation, and Mexico is not the exception. And like the virus it has different variants, different forms, like the forced labor, labor exploitation, child labor, human trafficking, and many others. Today, I will focus mainly on the most recurrent ones in our country. So, it is estimated that in Mexico, 850,000 people are victims of modern slavery. 850,000 people that lives under different situations and conditions like the ones I just mentioned. And to understand this, we need to navigate, we need to dive into a completely unknown ocean, unknown for all of us, and being discovering each one of its mysteries. So, let's begin. Let's dive into it. When we talk about the labor exploitation, we usually refer to countries in which this issue is institutionalized, and we completely avoid looking at our own country. In Mexico, the labor exploitation is real, and it's a large-scale issue. In every corner of our country, there are stories of men and women who work tirelessly, giving their lives to maintain this country, and yet they remain trapped into a cycle of misery and hopelessness. How is it possible that in a nation so rich in resources, in culture, in humanity, such indignities at work still exist? How can we accept that thousands of workers receive wages that don't even allow them to feed their families? Think of the farmer who under the scorching sun harvests the crops that reach our tables, and yet he cannot buy the very food he grows. Or thinking a textile factory worker who works day after day sewing garments that she or he will never be able to afford. Or thinking a construction worker who builds majestic buildings and lives in a cardboard house. Besides the attention and besides the regulations, the impact of labor exploitation in our country remains significant. Things are getting worse as we navigate deeper into this endless ocean. So, imagine, just for a moment, a 6-year-old child his hands, instead of holding a toy, they are holding heavy tools. Instead of hearing bedtime stories, he hears orders and shouts. Instead of playing, he's working day after day without rest, without school, a proper education, without security, without laughter. Where has his childhood gone? According to a national survey on child labor in Mexico, 3.7 million children and adolescents are forced to work under inhuman conditions. Children and adolescents chained into a cruel reality, victims of poverty, victims of greed, and victims of a system that sees them as tools rather than human beings. Children and adolescents who should be playing, exploring, learning. And we are also responsible. We are responsible when we buy products without thinking about who made them. When we turn a blind eye, when we don't demand a change, we are responsible, but also we are the solution. We still need to navigate deeper into this vast ocean. So, in the heart of our communities, there's a practice that still exists and continues silencing the dreams of our girls and young women. A practice that was legally prohibited in 2019, which remains a reality, especially in communities governed by customs and traditions. The forced marriage. In 2023, in the community of Atlapexco, Hidalgo, a 19-year-old girl was jailed for refusing an arranged marriage. The local authorities, sheltering behind ancestral traditions, detained her and demanded a fine of 50,000 pesos for her release. Thanks to the intervention of the Public Security Secretariat, she was rescued and now she received comprehensive care. But like this small story, there are hundreds. The forced marriage not only robs the childhood of our girls and young women, it also exposes them to situations of violence, limits their access to education, and perpetuates cycles of poverty and inequality. And with all of this, we finally arrive into the middle of this endless ocean where no one has ever sailed before. There's nothing in the distance. Only silence. And just silence. Throughout this talk, I have emphasized poverty as one of the most important factors for these modern slavery practices to happen. But why? We need to talk about the forced labor and the human trafficking. Forced labor is defined as work without the worker's consent, achieved through force, through threats or physical coercion. And the human trafficking involves the capture, transport, and exploitation of people through deceit, threats, or violence. Poverty is the perfect breeding ground for these scourges. Also, the lack of opportunities and the desperation led many to fall under the clutches of unscrupulous exploiters like the migrants, whose absence of support networks make them an easy prey for human trafficking rings. These criminal organizations operate exploiting their desperation and their need, offering them false promises of employment and security that always end in exploitation. Recent foundings in all the country have exposed the brutality in which these criminal organizations operate. Places have been found where victims of disappearances and violence were completely stripped of any opportunities for freedom. And like these cases of modern slavery, there are thousands in every region and in every state, as we can clearly see here, clearly, which highlights the urgency to strengthen the protection of the most vulnerable and try to combat this type of crimes with determination and justice. At the international level, the United Nations, through the Sustainable Goal 8.7, calls for the eradication of the forced labor, child labor, human trafficking, and many other modern slavery forms by 2030. 2030. We are in 2025, 5 years to go. I believe that this is unpredictable. In Mexico and many other countries, the situation is completely out of control. But at least the issue of modern slavery in our country is now on the radar of the United Nations. Recently, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights activated the protocol outlined in their Article 34 to boost the international cooperation in order to address modern slavery issues in our country. Especially the issue of human trafficking. This has never happened before in any other country in the world, even in those that are in war, like Afghanistan, Syria, Palestine, Ukraine. Never. Only in Mexico. And only for these issues. And I celebrate that because TikTok hashtags, TikTok videos, none of that will help us solve any of these issues. The only thing that they cause is misinformation and sensationalism. Maybe this could be the solution. We don't know. Like I said, it's unpredictable, but at least the issue of modern slavery in our country is now on the radar of the United Nations, and I celebrate that. Our real responsibility as young people is to report. Report to the Prophet, the federal attorney for the defense of the labor, by email, by phone, in person, whatever. Just report if you are a witness. Report if you are a victim of any type of exploitation. And that's the best way we can help to eradicate these issues in our country. It pains me not to offer you more options. But the truth is, there aren't any. Reporting is the only way to uphold our rights. Slavery has never disappeared. Like I said, it has just camouflaged itself. It surrounds us in the form of many inhuman practices and in the invisibility of those who suffer without a voice or rights. Every human life deserves to be free, with dignity, without chains, without fear. We cannot allow the slaves to continue existing in the 21st century. 50 million people around the world are victims of modern slavery. 850,000 Mexicans are victims of modern slavery. Modern slavery must end. And it depends on us to make that happen. Thank you so much.